Hello, and thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Carol Jenkins. The program is Black America, and we are thrilled today to have as our guest Rebecca Carroll, who's got a fabulous new memoir. Today is the pub date. It is available, people. And after you hear this conversation, you're going to rush out and buy many, many, many copies. I've been waiting since I heard about it to get it. It's called Surviving the White Gaze. She's one of our most valued cultural critics and conversationalists. Her podcast has Come Through with Rebecca Carroll, and she tackles race in America. Among her other books, Sugar and the Raw, Voices of Young Black Girls in America. And we're going to talk about all of that. Rebecca, thanks so much for being with us.
I am so thrilled to be here, Carol. I am beaming. It's a delight to be with you. You've been such a supporter and such a beautiful person and professional and Black woman to have in my life. And so I'm just delighted to be here.
Well, you know that I consider you one of my children, right? You know, I hope you won't be.
Yes,
you know,
and I love that. Why I'm beaming. It's just so great to share this with you. I'm proud of the work, and I hope that it feels good to have you hold it in your hands and to.
It is terrific, and I cannot tell you how long I had to wait, because as soon as you said, I guess you were writing it, you know, I ordered it, you know, and here we are. A fascinating story, really having so much to do with the work that you've done in the podcast and all of your criticism for the LA Times and the Guardian, everywhere, talking about race in America. And here you have a very, I would say, unique story. Tell us about it. I'll let you frame it, and then I'll frame it for what I see.
Sure. So it is my very deeply personal story of having been adopted as an infant into a white family and raised in an all white rural town, and having gone through school as the only Black student in my class, and sort of having this sense of yearning without being able to identify it, because I was so fully entrenched in the white gaze, which is that thing, that insidious thing that is around us and sort of decides the value based on its adjacency to whiteness. And so it wasn't until after I met my white birth mother and went to visit her in the seacoast town where she lived, where there was a small Black population, that I started to get a sense of what that yearning was, because I had to see it to know. And it was just that I felt bereft, that I had not had any Black folks in my life. And so began this kind of journey, which I know is a cliche and overused term, but it really has been a journey to kind of find not just Black chosen family, but my Black sense of self. And it really crystallized for me when I became a mother to a Black son, now 15 years ago. But that was the shift when I was like, I can write this and I need to write this. But it took me, again, another several years before I trusted and owned and felt wholly whole, and had the emotional fortitude to sort of tell the story.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful, sometimes a troubling journey, but a beautiful journey. So that you are a biracial adult now, writing about your childhood, adopted by a white family in New Hampshire. Well, now, as I interpret it, as well-meaning, but maybe perhaps a little bit clueless, right? And
so as I have these conversations, I think it's, I think one of the most important things is the way that we talk about, the way we use language around certainly interracial adoption, but also race, as you know, that I'm, as with Toni Morrison, I'm obsessed with language and the way that we use it. And I think that well-meaning and well-intentioned is one of those things that is kind of useless at this point.
Exactly.
And we have to stop bringing that into the equation, because it is this kind of cluelessness, but it's not even that silly. It's very, very serious, right? Like the cluelessness or colorblindness, like these are words that I feel people use kind of casually, when in fact, it's a delusional kind of negative force to enter into a relationship with a Black person as a white person in a country that has such deeply, deeply internalized issues in terms of how to make that relationship work. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right,
It's a sort of convoluted way of saying, like, we have to dig deeper into the ways in which we talk about and think about intentions, meaning, being tuned in or being aware of color and race.
And I love your clarification of it, because at a certain point in time, and I'm old enough to know that that's the way everybody assumed that so-called integration or equality or whatever would be, is that people wouldn't see race. They wouldn't
That's
see,
right.
anything. And so when I say well-intentioned, from your book, we certainly realized that it had very serious intentions, but they weren't evil, let us say, who, I mean, to put them in that category of, and your biological mother was a little more complicated. Talk a bit about her.
It's hard to talk about her because I wrote what I could say about her. And she is, yes, a complicated person. We had a very, very intense relationship that became very toxic. But it's funny that, it's not funny, but that you mention evil. Because there, as a memoirist and as a person going through my life, I try to approach all of my relationships, all of my work with compassion, almost a radical compassion. And in writing this book, I really, really struggled with how to describe my birth mother and the sort of experiences that I had with her and the very specific anecdotes that I had with her and the language that she used. And I wanted to make sure that people understood that I really did love her and that she really was she had many things to offer me, but ultimately, I don't believe she had my best interest at heart. And so I could not maintain that relationship.
Right. And I think you succeeded telling that very well. I don't think anyone would come away with any other conclusion, but that. I was just reading this morning your piece in Think, the NBC Online. You're talking about your biological mother showing and then giving you photos of your biological father, Black father. Talk to us a little bit about that. And I want you to know, as I was reading this book, I kept virtually, as the word of the day, hugging you. Rebecca, it's going to turn out. You're going to be fabulous.
One of the best things that an early reader said to me was that we could tell in the story, in the language, in the writing, that you were going to be okay. And that means everything, because I do believe that it isn't just about surviving, it's about becoming, right? And now, of course, our lovely former Lady Michelle Obama has turned becoming into something that we can envision, but particularly poignant, I think, for Black women. So my birth father, my birth mother had 2 photos of him that she gave me when I was a teenager, and I had first started sort of talking with Black boys and indulging my interest in attraction in Black boys and trying to figure out what my Black father would sound like, even or how he would advise me, or what he would tell me about these boys. And when you read the book, you'll see that I was getting a very sort of difficult reaction or assessment of Black men and Black boys from my birth mother. And so I started to have this relationship with him in my mind. But again, it was extremely hard to do that while my birth mother and my adoptive parents are white, and whether intentionally, whether on purpose, deliberately or not, there was this kind of pulling away that I felt from him or any Black narrative, because there was no support and there was no community. There was no sense of, you have to keep letting, for white adoptive parents, you have to treat your family as though it is Black, or for mixed families, because your children, and I say this a lot, your children are your children, but they're also children of Black culture. And so to that end, it's not just one trip to the hair, you know, to the woman who does your hair. It's not just one poster. It's not just one book. It's you have to be encouraged and engaged with Blackness, and it just nobody around me was.
Right. Right. So you saw the photograph, and you ultimately met him as well, which
I did,
yeah.
which was profound and also, you know, deeply sad. I wasn't really prepared for who he was and where he was. And, you know, I had been not just raised in sort of a hippie, intellectual, artistic community, but also, you know, my birth mother and her background, sort of very intellectually focused, and you know, very New England kind of waspy sort of. She came from money, but she didn't have money. But so I had these things that I was kind of ways of being that I was sort of sorting through my brain and mind. And again, I couldn't shed everything completely to fully embrace him. You know, here I met him. He was homeless. He was overweight. He was absolutely in love with me the moment we met. And I was overwhelmed. I was absolutely overwhelmed. And I did feel that we would have more time, but unfortunately he died before I was able to come back to him in a way that I would have been more compassionate, and would have been able to have left behind this sort of the internalized white gaze.
Right. And you could read the piece on Think at NBC.com, edited by Meg, or supported by Megan Carpenter, who also edited me, and
shout
out, fabulous, wonderful writer, editor.
Shout out. She really, and I thank her in the acknowledgments, because there was a 2-year period when I was a columnist at the Guardian, and she was my editor, and she really, you know, it was a pivotal moment for me because it was the year of Ferguson and Michael Brown being shot, and it was a year that really truly unlocked a rage that I decided I was not going to moderate, or that I wasn't going to compromise. And Megan really saw that and really encouraged me to thread that through my writing, and I did, and it made me a stronger writer.
Terrific. I recommend it. Another writer did a review of your book, Rebecca Traister, who we all love as well, wrote about your book. It's not just about survival, but about interrogation of family, race, power, and the lasting impact of intimate harm. You know, I think that, you know, we could say that about, most of us can say that about our families, you know, the lasting harm that we walked away with, but yours was a particular kind, all of these things in motion, and you as a child having to navigate all of that. That was an extraordinary challenge, you know, for anyone, I would say.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think often, and you may, you know, we follow each other on social, and you may have even remembered, you know, throughout the past couple of years as I was writing this book, you know, sort of thinking about this little girl who's on the cover of the book, you know, but also later when I was 11 and met my birth mother, and was at this bar, and this guy came on to me, and trying to navigate that, and feeling like it was my fault that I couldn't, you know, I mean, I think that it was particular to my experience, but it's also what girls and women, especially Black girls and women, are, you know, the way in which we are adultified so early on and sexualized so early on. And the expectation was that I, this 11-year-old Black girl sitting at a bar with adults and having to deal with this 30-year-old white guy who comes up to me and, you know, says I'm probably a Spitfire in bed. I mean, you know, it's like, thinking back for her, I ache for her, but I am also I'm so in awe of her in some ways. And
I know, that was, you know, you never doubt that you really, you know, prevailed over an extraordinarily tough situation. So I do want to talk about Black girls, because recently I was in a conversation with a group of psychoanalysts and writers and all, and the subject of the talk came up, and when that comes up, people are always assuming that we're talking about Black boys. And what I said was, hardly anybody talks about the talk that Black girls get or need to get. And generations of mothers and grandmothers have given their girls this talk, and it's not a pleasant thing to have to go through.
Isn't that something? And I'm glad you brought that up. And I really hope that this is something that we talk more about, certainly this year and in this moment of reset regarding race and racial reckoning, whatever that means, and a new administration and our Madam Vice President Kamala Harris. And there are lots of things and ways to point to that suggest we'll be able to have more and broader and deeper conversations about race, but specifically about Black girls. And as you know, I wrote a book called Sugar in the Raw about Black girls growing up in America. And I revisited it numerous times as I was writing my story as a Black girl, and just the themes that were shared and paralleled, just that we can take it, that we, that we either will find some kind of reserve of sass or confidence, or that we are somehow naturally able to ward off these assessments of us as the lesser of everyone.
Of everyone. At the bottom of the pile, so to speak.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And part of what we have to say to our girls, and now that I have granddaughters, it's this: how do you tell these beautiful, gorgeous, brilliant people that the world is not often going to see them that way? I mean, the standards of beauty, the standards of whatever. I mean, it's such a heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking, really.
It truly is. And of course, it makes me think of my 5th grade teacher, who, told me I was very pretty for a Black girl. And what's interesting to me about that is that's the outfacing racism that I carried and talked about openly. What I realized when I was writing the memoir is that it's the thing that came after that I actually internalized, which was that most Black girls are ugly. Most Black girls are unattractive. That was the thing that I took well into my 20s. And so I think in terms of having the talk, whether it is with our Black boys or with our Black girls, I think we have to find new language to convey that, there is this inequity. There is this way that white people are going to have to unlearn if we're going to have a fair and just society. But in the meantime, I know that the ancestors really looked out for me. I know that there were moments, for all I know, in that moment with the guy at the bar, do you know what I mean? Like that, the upshot for me in terms of being raised by white parents who didn't really know how to raise a Black daughter is that the ancestors were always looking out for me. And that is what I say to my child. And that is what I say to young Black girls who I mentor. And, I don't mean to sound like really woo-woo about it, but I do believe that. I believe we weren't supposed to be here. And I believe that the ancestors made a path and that they're still watching and taking care.
Right. Because what I've always remarked on is that it seems to be an ancestral. It's passed down to all of us. That how do we instinctively know? And what you didn't have was this, Black womanhood, mothers, grandmothers, and whatever surrounding you to protect you, to say you're great, you're fine, it's going to be okay. So you were at the mercy of.
Right. Well, that's why when I discovered Black women writers and Black literature, it was just blew my mind entirely, and I felt embraced by that. But I also think, without sounding too, again, too cliche or whatnot, is that being valued by Blackness and the Blackness around you is actually the more important thing. And that was a lesson I had to learn, because that is part of the white gaze, and another Toni Morrison quote, which is that racism is about distracting you. It's about distracting you from what actually matters. And what matters is that you are on the team that has survived and been the most creative and the most resilient, and the most, artistically, creatively innovative. So that's what matters.
Right, right. Well, 7-year-old Sophie, soon to be 8-year-old, just discovered Zora Neale Hurston, and realized, how is that possible? And she came and said, "You won't believe Zora. She wrote, she did this," and So, at any rate, let's hope that the generations come to appreciate it.
But she seems like an amazing young gal. I mean.
So I do have to ask you about the racial turmoil. I can't let the best examiner of race in America get away without saying, the Capitol is assaulted by proudly identifying white supremacists. All of this insanity going on. How do you assess it, and is there a way back? I know we have hope in the vice president and what the Biden administration can do, but it seems pretty deep to me in terms of the fissure in our society.
Yeah, I mean, somebody asked me the other day, do I think that we will ever get to a place where we are a truly multicultural society? And my response to that is, we are a multicultural society. That's not the problem. The problem is that we have to undo that which has been internalized for 400 years. And that doesn't happen overnight, as you know, and it also doesn't happen with laws, frankly. It happens when people are engaged. It happens when people push themselves to a place that feels terrible, miserable. It happens when people don't just say, let's have a difficult conversation, but have a difficult conversation, sit in that conversation until it feels really lousy, and then think, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to solve for this lousy feeling? What small thing do I have to shift in my brain or in my heart or in my gut? How can I lend myself and my smarter thinking to my instinct? It's stuff that that if you are white in a white supremacist society, like, what is the incentive? What is the incentive?
Right. So we know that Surviving the White Gaze is going to be a television series. Tell us about that. And I'm very impressed that you are writing it. That is so great.
Yeah. I am super excited. It was brought to MGM TV by Christine Vachon at Killer Films, a woman, a producer who is extraordinary and who I have admired for.
Legendary, right? She's legendary, right?
Yeah. So, and so she read it, and we had a meeting with MGM, and we had this conversation, and I just said, I want to, first of all, I want it to live in the world for, book as a book, but then I want to challenge myself, which is something I've done throughout my career, like to flex another muscle. I mean, as you know, I went into radio at WNYC without having done radio ever before, really.
And a big superstar, radio superstar.
Well, thank you. So I saw this show, I May Destroy You, written by Michaela Cole and acted in it by her. It was such a gorgeous piece of television, a limited series, television series. And I thought, that's what I want to do. That is what I want to do with this book. So that's my bar, not too high.
Well, I'm thrilled because we have recent, examples of it not working out so well, for writers and production companies and streamers who say we have to have X, Y, and Z to make it authentically Black, and all of those are, negative, as you say, stereotypes of what needs to be in something in order to make it, quote, sell, or for people to watch it. So I am thrilled that you were writing it. Do you have a timeline yet? I know that's a deep,
No.
Okay. Good. Don't put a time.
I don't yet. What I have said to myself and to MGM and Christine is that I just want the book to live in the world for at least a week before I start to think about which, because there's a lot that could be optioned or could be not
Right.
optioned, but written about. And so I want to see what people respond to.
Okay, Surviving the White Gaze, Rebecca Carroll. It's a fabulous memoir, and you're a fabulous person. I am so thrilled for you. Thanks for talking with us today.
You are the best, the most magnificent. Thank you, Carol.
And thanks to you all out there for watching us, for joining us today as well. I'm Carol Jenkins. The program is Black America, and we'll see you the next time.